18, Russia against Spain. 80,000 fans found their way into the Moscow arena in what was to be a very warm afternoon. Having survived the turbulence of the pre-tournament, Russia went into the contest unbeaten since 2016. They'd won 15 and drawn 8. Interestingly, they'd failed to win 4 attempts against a host nation at tournaments. 3 changes for Spain today. Koke and Asensio were in, but the biggest news was that Iniesta, the stalwart of their team, was surprisingly left out. It would be the first time in 34 games. He'd played 33 out of 34 games, spanning 9 tournaments, and that was the 2-0 victory over Honduras at the 2010 World Cup. Spain had been rather leaky at this tournament, conceding 5 goals. So they were they were hoping that they'd be able to improve on this statistic. For the Russians, the eyes of the nation were upon this team. 150 million Russians. The fans had totally got behind the team. There was an expectancy, a belief in the team. They were now proud of the team. I mean, could the sports support spur the Russians to an unexpected victory? There'd been a massive build-up to this contest. For the team, Akinfeev was making his 110th cap. Dzyuba would lead the team in attack as Cheryshev was surprisingly dropped. A goal scorer of 3 goals. It was probably tactical with the system employed of 5-4-1 and in order to 5-3-1-1 in order to combat the Spanish and remain rock solid at the back. In terms, the Russians and the Spanish had played had contested 2 contests at the 2008 tournament. The Spanish coming out on top on both occasions, 4-1 and 3-0 on their way to their crown in Austria, in Vienna. Interestingly, they defeated the USSR for their first ever victory in 1964. The nations had played as recently as November 2017. It was an enthralling 3-3 draw in St. Petersburg, in which the Russians came back from 2-0 down and 3-2. It was a game that would long live within the memory for all Russians and much of the viewing world. As expected, Spain were to dominate possession, the hosts to sit back deep, 9 men behind the ball, stifle their opponents in midfield and counter swiftly. But there was a blow for the hosts after just 12 minutes from the free kick. Ignacevich somehow grappling with Ramos, but merely falling to the ground with the ball inexplicably to bounce off his heel and into the net, and the nation were a goal down. The exchanges suggested none other than Spain's continued dominance, as Russia was certainly required to change their game if they wanted to get back into it and not merely contain. For Spain, Isco was pivotal for the Spanish. The home fans were silent as their team struggled, and there was no threat on Spain's goal. The Spanish were looking very comfortable despite the hosts keeping their shape and structure. The home fans were boisterous each time Russia set off in forays upfield, few and far between. Russia then got the break required that they'd been hoping for when Piqué was adjudged to have handled a ball that from a set piece into the box. His left arm was deemed to have been raised. Dzyuba, staying composed, brought the nations level placing the ball past De Gea in the Spanish goal. Russia's plan was certainly working. Sitting deep, frustrating the Spanish, limiting opportunities, hitting on the counter. Spain really needed something different. Perhaps Iniesta would be just the man. For the start of the second half, it would be a virtually replica to the first. Akinfeev, untroubled, had been brought into action at the end of the first half when a frustrated Diego Costa, looking to get in from behind, forced the save before Null could bounce early into the restart, forced the keeper to react. The crowd were pleased to see the entrance of Cheryshev, as the noise levels were suddenly increased. Smolov, who had scored 2 against the Spanish in that 3-3 draw, would soon join him, as Granat had already been on the field since replacing Zhirkov at half-time. Iniesta eventually was brought on to add some craft to magic for Spain. The pattern remained the same, no real danger to the Russian defence as Spain continued to probe, somewhat slow and lethargic. The Russians continued to defend well, remaining disciplined, and time running out for Spain. Iniesta forced the finest save of the contest, Akinfeev reading well to touch the ball away from goal. The frustrations would continue for Spain as Russia would survive up until the 94th minute. The game plan working as they'd hoped. The Spanish stifled, but interestingly, the Russians were looking exhausted during the break. It was very much rearguard action as it was business as usual for the start of the extra time period. Nothing of any significance. The home side dogged as ever. Russia, without changing anything, and Spain certainly wouldn't change anything. They'd only play one way. 3 minutes into the second period, Spain thought they'd pierced the Russian defence. Rodrigo, the newly arrived substitute, showing pace before Akinfeev was forced into parrying like the low drive. Spain had definitely stepped up again now as Russia were under pressure, the tension and the anticipation. Then there was VAR. The drama ensued as the possibility of 2 fouls were evident, were possibilities within the area as the ball came over, but the Russians sighed in relief when the officials felt dismissed and failed to react and consult. Spain were looking desperate to win. The Russians were hanging on as the skies opened up, the thunder and the rain falling down. Russians were almost celebrating as if they were victorious as a nation held its breath. Russia had never been involved in a penalty shootout. The Spanish had been involved in 3 World Cups, winning one in 2002 against the Republic of Ireland before losing to the South Koreans. They'd also lost in 1986 against Belgium. And so to the penalties. Iniesta stepped up to calmly put the Spanish 1-0 ahead. Smolov brought his nation level. Piqué then smashed in to put the Spanish 2-1 ahead before the almost 39-year-old Ignacevich drew the nation's level. But then it was Koke was the chosen one. He'd missed his effort as Golovin put the Russians ahead. Ramos in his 17th international World Cup game stepped up to give the Spanish hope. 3-3. Cheryshev then put the Russians 4-3 ahead before Aspas was to unfortunately see his efforts come off the leg of the diving Akinfeev, the undoubted hero. It would be the first time the Russians would reach the quarterfinals since 1970. The unfancied and host nation had shown their resilience. They kept their nerve. The game plan achieved the goal. emotion amongst the Russian players was evident as the faces of the Spanish players, the reactions of Spanish, like, said it all. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective for the Russians. It was definitely going to be lots of from Russia. It was definitely going to be from Russia with love tonight. They'd shown their heart, their spirit, and their desire, and they deserve to proceed to the quarterfinals. Spain would need to regroup from the shock of this fallout, and that was it for Spain.